Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Ishi Robinson to talk about her novel, Sweetness in the Skin. Sweetness in the Skin is a coming-of-age novel that tells the story of a Jamaican teenager who uses her baking skills to overcome familial challenges and societal biases in order to pursue her dream. Now, in the novel, we meet a girl named Pumpkin Patterson, who was raised by her Aunt Sophie. Now, when Aunt Sophie moves to France, Pumpkin is left behind with her abusive and alcoholic mom, Paulette. Now, Pumpkin dreams of escaping to France to join her Aunt Sophie, but it depends on her passing her French exams. And in order to do so, she will have to use her baking skills to help provide the means to achieve her dreams. So in this episode, Ishi and I talk about her new book, we talk about what she's reading and writing, but we also play a fun either-or game about things to do in Jamaica. From food we'd order there, along with drinks, sweet treats, and lots more. But before we get into the episode, pretty please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, leave the show a 5-star rating, and write me a review if you love the show. Also, the podcast has this new feature where you can text me directly. Yes, that's right. You can send me a text with your thoughts. So let me know what you think about this episode. Tell me about the last book you read and loved, or just any other question that's top of your mind. So click the link at the top of the show notes that says, send me a text with your thoughts, and I'll share some of your messages with you on air when I do my solo shows. So thanks in advance. And now onto the episode with author Ishi Robinson. Hi friends, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about her debut novel, Sweetness in the Skin, is author Ishi Robinson. Hi Ishi, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Hi Victoria, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. Listeners, we had a whole conversation before we hit record. So I have to tell you, Ishi is my people's. Okay, she's good people. And I'm really excited about her debut, Sweetness in the Skin. But before we get into the book, tell me, Ishi, how are you feeling? How excited are you that this book is now available?
Beyond. I can't even really put it in words somehow because it was just completely unexpected. You know, when I sat down to write this book, it was just because I set myself a challenge of writing a book. I was a short story writer, and I set myself this challenge, and it was the most difficult thing I have ever done. And my only goal, my singular goal, was to just finish the book. I couldn't think too far ahead about, getting an agent, getting it published, that kind of thing. So to sit here now and be talking to you and to have people, holding the book in their hands and reading it and giving me feedback, and it's just incredible.
Oh, I can't even imagine. Now, I love this story because I just connected with the characters in the book so much. But before we kind of really get into the details of each of them, tell our listeners about your book, Sweetness in the Skin. What can they expect when they pick up a copy? What's your elevator pitch?
Oh, I hate elevator pitches because I am long-winded. But I'm going to say Sweetness in the Skin is about a young girl trying to bake her way out of a bad situation and find her place in the world. It's my elevator pitch. What I want them to get from it is I want people to really be immersed in Jamaican culture, particularly 90s Jamaica. That's my Jamaica. That was my formative years. I want them to taste the food. I want them to smell the air. I want them to have this feeling like they're in Jamaica and they're experiencing the culture. And they're alongside my character, Pumpkin Patterson, as she just figures out her life and figures out what family means and what it means to belong.
I love hearing that. And I think you did a great job at the elevator pitch, by the way. we see Pumpkin baking her way out of a bad situation. I want us to first talk about the setting. I love how you said 1990s Jamaica. That was your Jamaica. For me, I think I really got to know Jamaica in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mhm.
So that was my Jamaica and my memories about that. But let's talk one about the setting, you know, where Pumpkin is living. What is the backdrop? Where is this book set?
So it's in Kingston, Jamaica. And one of the things that I explore in the book is this idea of classism, right? So you've got what in Jamaica we call it, we have uptown and we have downtown. And in general, there's this area in Jamaica called Halfway Tree. And then uptown is like above the tree. And then downtown is below the tree. So Pumpkin lives like just below Halfway Tree. So she is not downtown, not downtown. But she's in an area it's not so nice, but it's not the best that it could be, particularly when compared to some of her schoolmates, for example, like Mandy Chen, who you will meet in the book, who lives like quite, far uptown. So that's where she is situated in the book. And it's in Kingston.
So one of the first things I learned, I spent 4 years in Kingston. It was coming on 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I learned was the divide, Halfway Tree.
Yeah, okay.
So to kind of hear you share that, I was just like, okay. So yes, it's, uptown is above Halfway Tree. I was confused because I used to always say, but what about Crossroads? Because it's called Crossroads.
It's not so black and white, like
Yes.
you say there's Halfway Tree, but it's not so black and white because there's different, sections within sections. I'm simplifying it just to kind of give a picture. But yeah, like everywhere else, it's not like you cross Halfway Tree and immediately you're in a bad area. That's absolutely
100%.
not how it is. There's nice areas there as well. There's normal areas. There's ghetto. There's everything is kind of mixed in all the different areas. But just for the simplification of it, I just see Halfway Tree as that line.
Yeah, it's funny. That was the first line I was actually taught. So that was funny to hear you say that. Yeah, it was funny hearing you say that. So for my listeners, essentially, Pumpkin is a girl from the other side of the tracks. I love that you mentioned Mandy Chen. I love getting to know Mandy as well. But let's talk about Pumpkin's family. Mm-hmm. So Pumpkin, we meet her. She's 13 years old. She lives with her grandmother, Cecile, or how do you say it?
Grandmother Cecile.
Awesome. And her aunt is Sophie. Right. And her mom is in and out of the picture, but we also meet her mom, Paulette.
Yes.
And I loved this setting just because you see Pumpkin surrounded by strong women. And I think that is a theme I often saw, especially in Jamaica and even in the diaspora. It's just, we tend to be surrounded by strong women. So tell me about Pumpkin's family unit. Tell me about her grandmother, Cecile, her aunt, Sophie, and then we can get into her mom a bit, even though her mom is struggling and is in and out of the picture.
Yeah. So the mother, Cecile, was herself a young mother, and through circumstance, she had these two kids, and Sophie is light-skinned and Paulette is darker skinned. And this is a theme of colorism that I also explore in the book. It's also very entwined with the classism as well. So she's got these two daughters, and because of how she was raised, she's Cecile, the grandmother, and because of her environment, she decides she's going to put all of her efforts into Sophie, because as the lighter skinned daughter, Cecile, the grandmother, feels like she has the best chance, Sophie has the best chance of like elevating the family, right? So she puts all of her efforts into Sophie and kind of leaves Paulette by the wayside. When Paulette has Pumpkin, our main character, Pumpkin also comes out like light skin and looks closer to Sophie. She kind of looks more like Sophie's daughter. And so Sophie feels more of a connection to her than her own mother does. And Sophie takes her under her wing and they form this bond. And I wanted to really explore about what it would be like to be in one family and have such distinct, different upbringings. Because when we meet Paulette, and we see how she treats Pumpkin, how she treats her sister. There's a lot of animosity there. There's a lot of resentment there. We have to wonder, why does this happen? Why is she like this? I think most of it is nurture versus nature, because her mother really did not put that love and time and effort into her that she did into her sister. And that's kind of the theme I wanted to explore with the family.
Often when I try to describe Jamaica to friends and some family members who are just not familiar with the island, they have a certain perception. I often would say, yes, it's a country with problems, no question about it. However, I said, our biggest sticking point as a people is the cousin of racism. It's colorism. Mm-hmm. I, again, have that experience. I'm much darker skinned. You have the family members who are lighter skinned. People receive mm-hmm. you a lot differently. They will push. So I found that incredibly relatable in the novel as well. So within family, but also within society. And classism is a big theme, I think, in the novel, but it's also a really big factor, I think, in Jamaica as well, because then you have people who are dark skinned, but it's like, you have more money, you have a family name. Mm-hmm. And I think class and colorism are two big themes. I'm not, it's a cousin of racism. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not discounting that element, but I think that's what we struggle with as a people, because then now to contrast Pumpkin, we have Mandy Chen. Mm-hmm. And we have a huge Chinese and Southeast Asian diaspora on the island as well. If you go to school in Jamaica, odds are you're going to go to school with them, especially for private education, extra lessons, all these things. So when I saw Mandy Chen, I was like, yes, this is also someone I know. So tell us about the other side of the coin, Mandy Chen. Where does Pumpkin meet her? Pumpkin's interaction with her, and then also the reception from the family.
So Pumpkin meets Mandy at high school. And just to clarify, because there's such a debate about what is high school, because it's different in every country. So for us, high school starts at age 11. I think in the States you have middle
school. Yeah.
But we just call it high school.
Yep.
So they meet in high school, and they're at a school which is modeled off of my school, my high school, where there's just a mix of different people. There's a mix of classes. There's a mix of, when I say classes, like this idea of, low income, high income, middle income. There's a mix of that. There's a mix of ethnicity that you've got, because in Jamaica, we just some mix up. That's what we always do. We mix up. So sometimes you can't even tell what people are, because we don't really care too much to sort of identify.
Correct.
Our motto is out of many, one people. As you say, we had a huge influx of Chinese. At the time, they were indentured servants after the end of slavery. The same happened with South Asian peoples also came to the island, and then everyone just mixed up. So the school is a very mixed space. And Pumpkin meets Mandy there at school, and they form a connection just based on the personality and based on their character. But Pumpkin is she's always nervous that she's going to be found out, because she's trying to pass, basically, is what she's doing. She's trying to pass as uptown, and she's trying to do that because it's been drummed into her from her Auntie Sophie that this is the way that you're going to make it anywhere. This is the way you're going to get through. It's by these connections, by knowing the right people. And she has this pressure on her to, say the right things and in the right way. One of the things that I really loved about writing this novel was being able to use patois, to use our dialect, right? Mm-hmm. When I was growing up in Jamaica, patois was a thing that, like the language of the uneducated, basically. Yes. Like if you spoke patois at home, your parents would be like, speak properly. Or at school, your teacher, speak properly. You're supposed to speak the Queen's English, although all of us speak patois to varying degrees, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that there was a conversation in the book between Auntie Sophie And Pumpkin. And Pumpkin is telling her that, these girls at school, like Mandy and that cohort there, they're from uptown, they're from the quote unquote nice areas. She says, but they speak patois. They're able to speak it with no problem. Why can't I? And Auntie Sophie is like, they are beyond reproach. They have established themselves as the upper classes. So they can do what they want. But if you are trying to pass, you cannot slip. And that's a lot of pressure for a little girl. So I think that Auntie Sophie, when she got wind of that friendship between Pumpkin and Mandy, she was thrilled. But then Pumpkin's best friend, Tamara, who lives on the same street that she does, even though her family is slightly better off, that causes a lot of tension between them as well, because Tamara feels like, well, she's a sellout. Like, you can't even be real with her. So what kind of friendship is that?
So in a funny way, and I know especially, for people living in the developed world where it's a much larger space, we often talk about code switching.
Yes.
That's essentially what Pumpkin is doing. She's one way with Mandy, but then she's another way with her other friends. And it's, your other friends seeing that. And, there's that divide for sure. Let's bring it back to the plot of the story. So essentially, listeners, you have an idea of the backstory of just Pumpkin and the people in this book. Of course, there are many others. But essentially what happens is that Pumpkin's grandmother passes away. Aunt Sophie has immigrated. She has gone to France. And we now see Pumpkin wanting to leave the island and join her aunt in France. But in order to do that, she has to take a French exam. Tell us about what happens with Pumpkin and the decision now, I need to go and join my aunt, and her starting to bake to raise money to meet her financial obligations.
So Auntie Sophie going to France, they always had this dream. Auntie Sophie was obsessed with France and everything French. And it was her dream to go and live in France. And she always wanted to take Pumpkin with her. So they used to joke and laugh about when we go to France and, we will have our black and white striped shirt and our baguette and, these kind of stereotypes of France. And it was just like for Pumpkin, it was just a lovely kind of daydream. And it was something that was so extraordinary that she couldn't even imagine that it would be possible. It would be like saying, one day we're going to live in Narnia, for her. But then her aunt actually achieves the goal of going to France, but isn't able to take her right away. So Pumpkin has to first, because she's not her legal guardian, Pumpkin has to first take this test, and then the aunt will figure out the guardianship. And, Auntie Sophie gets over there, and there's this thing with, in Jamaica where people think the minute you leave the island, you're just rolling in money and you're supposed to be sending back money, sending back barrels full of clothes and that kind of thing. That wasn't the case for Auntie Sophie. She was, I think, just a secretary, and she was still kind of saving up. And, through some circumstances, I don't want to give too much of the book away, there was an opportunity for Pumpkin to take the test for free, but through some circumstances that fell through, and it ends up that she has to pay for this test. Now, again, this comes into play with this whole, the haves and the have-nots. For uptown people who are taking this test, they can cover the fees, no problem. But for Pumpkin, who is at home, her mother, as you said before, is kind of in and out of the picture. The aunt is trying her best to send money for supplies and for food and to maintain the house. She doesn't have anything extra. And Pumpkin is actually afraid to tell Auntie Sophie that she's messed things up and now has to pay for this test. But one of the things that Pumpkin loves more than anything is to bake. Baking for her has always been a way of escape. So even within her home, when things just got a little bit too much, a little too rough, she would escape to the kitchen and she would rub together a sweet potato pudding, a bread pudding, some coconut drops, And I chose baking because it's such a precise art that you have to focus. It's not like cooking where you can kind of throw things in and try it out. Like with baking, you have to be very precise about, if it says 1 cup of flour, it's 1 cup, not just like an eyeball of how much flour you think might work. So she has always loved to bake and always used it as a means of comfort. And then she discovers that people like her baking so much that she could actually make some money off of this. So she starts a little enterprise where she is selling her goods at school, at the corner shop, etc., to make some money to get to Auntie Sophie. But there's a lot of obstacles in the way. And every time she feels like she's getting somewhere, something happens to kind of throw her off course. And I will leave those some things for our readers to discover for themselves.
Yes, yes, absolutely, because we're staying away from spoilers here. But essentially, we see Pumpkin trying to get the money, trying to do her exam, trying to meet her Aunt Sophie. And yes, there are lots of other characters and lots of other happenings that occur in the book as well. But I'm curious, who was your favorite character in the novel?
I mean, Pumpkin is hands down my favorite, but let's put her aside.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, apart from Pumpkin, it might be Boots. Boots is such a sweet character. Boots is a colleague of Auntie Sophie's who works at the French embassy, and he was a little bit in love with her, with Auntie Sophie. And he kind of appeared at the house one day, and Pumpkin herself was like love at first sight with Boots. He popped up into this house of women. There were just never any men there. And he just had this great energy. And he's someone who really ends up being so supportive and so just such a wonderful presence in Pumpkin's life. And Boots was inspired by a real person, by my Uncle Shoes, who was a good friend of both my parents. And he was just such a lovely, such a sweet, sweet man. And he really did buy me once he came over, he bought jerk pork that was so spicy. I had to soak my lips in ice water. And that was a scene that I put in the book as well, that Boots did for Pumpkin. So I think he's my favorite besides Pumpkin.
Oh, I love hearing that. That is so cool. Tell me though, where did the inspiration for this story come from? I mean, I felt reading, I knew a Pumpkin, I knew an Aunt Sophie, a Cecile, just different people. It felt familiar. I love that you said you wanted to transport readers to Jamaica. I for sure felt I was there. But where did the idea come from to write a story about a young girl, like you said earlier, baking her way out of a bad situation?
I think about that a lot, where it actually came from. And I feel, I started writing, Pumpkin just came to me. She just popped into my head. And the French test, it was supposed to be like with the French teacher, this whole tension with the French teacher, because I personally had some tension with my French teacher in high school. And I think maybe I was working through some things there. But then I think a lot of what she was going through in terms of feeling like she didn't belong, feeling this sense of, I don't know, having to figure things out on her own. I just found it so relatable. Just thinking back on my life in Jamaica, this isn't an autobiography by any means, but when I was thinking about Jamaica, I felt this deep sense of nostalgia and homesickness when I was writing the book. I was just so homesick for the food and for the smell of it, and for just everything about this time and this place. And with Pumpkin, her journey to find herself and love herself and be comfortable in her own skin, it kind of mirrors my own journey in a way. And I have often said I feel quite jealous of Pumpkin because she figures a lot of stuff out in her teenage years, and it took me like 40 years to to figure it out. So I would definitely say it comes from my own sort of feelings about, when you're young and you just feel like you don't know where you belong, you don't know if you can be yourself, will you be accepted? Will people love you if they know who you really are? I just wanted to explore those ideas. And then the thing about the colorism and the classism is also something that I wanted to discuss. Growing up in Jamaica, I grew up, I think, in a bit of a bubble, and I didn't really see what it was fully like, because that's just the way it was. This is just how it is. And it wasn't until I left the island and I was able to sort of look back from a broader perspective where I could see, okay, there definitely is these divides and these little things people say and people do because of where you come from and who you know and what is your last name and who are you connected to. And those things, they kind of bothered me a little when I would tell people about life in Jamaica. So I wanted to kind of work through that as well and just give people an idea of what Jamaica is really like, or at least how it was at that time when I was growing up there.
I found this book incredibly relatable. And I think you're right about not seeing things when you're there, because I know for a fact I did not see anything. So you don't realize the nuances until you leave. And it's what, when I left, for sure, as in not going back every year, I realized, I was like, okay, yeah.
It's like growing up in a small town almost.
Yes.
And everybody know your business.
Yes. It's like a small town. Exactly.
Yeah. Small town. So
yes.
It's very important. Like, okay, well, so if you know this person, then okay, then you're worth talking to. But if you don't know that person, then I don't know.
That's a no. Exactly. No, that is a good example. So for my listeners who haven't been to Jamaica, don't know what it's like, think about it as living in a small town, because I think that's a great comparison for sure. But I do want to encourage people to come visit Jamaica anyway. I think it's a beautiful island. Again, yes, it has its problems, but I think it's the best place to go on a holiday. And when you read Sweetness in the Skin, you'll get a feel of Jamaica for sure. But I want to play a game with Ishi and ask her. We're going to go through some places in Jamaica. We're going to talk about food and sweets in Jamaica, even some drinks, so that if you happen to visit there, you have an idea of where to go and what to eat. So are you ready?
I hope so. I've been gone for 24 years. So
No, you're going to know these places. I promise you, you're going to know these places. So, okay. If someone is visiting, right, would you recommend Dunn's River Falls or the 7 Mile Beach?
It has to be either or?
Yes, you have to pick one.
Oh, Lord, have mercy. I'm going to say the 7 Mile Beach in Negril, because Dunn's River Falls, it's beautiful. It's amazing, but it is freezing cold. Yes. And I have always had a fear of climbing those slippery falls, because every time we went, somebody would drop and knock out their teeth. So I'm going to say Negril 7 Mile Beach, which is a beautiful stretch of beach.
Yes, I think it's beautiful too, and I've never climbed the rocks, and I don't think I will. Okay, are we going to Blue Lagoon in Portland, or are we going to Treasure Beach in St. Elizabeth?
Can I tell you, I have never been to Treasure Beach, and it is can I tell you? Never been to Treasure Beach, and I'm actually planning to go next year.
Yay!
But Blue Lagoon, that is beyond. It is beyond beautiful. So these are actually hard, because everywhere is just so amazing in Jamaica.
Right?
Yeah.
We have a couple more.
Yeah.
We have a couple more, I promise. But I was taken to Blue Lagoon by my Kingston friends. But I grew up going to Treasure Beach. So my grandparents would take the drive down, because we're in Mandeville, and go to Treasure Beach. So that was always fun. Okay, now I haven't been to either of these two places, but would you go to Green Grotto Caves in Discovery Bay, or would you go to the no, not true. I did the Blue Mountains, Blue and Drunkrow Mountains National Park.
I don't know. My heart is leaning towards the grotto. I climbed Blue Mountain when I was like...
Me too.
Yeah?
I did. Yeah, I did. So when I was in Kingston, I was actually working. I was working at the University Hospital, and the radiology department there, shout out if you're listening, they had a trip. Like, they would go at that time. I remember them going like every year or every other year.
Yeah.
So I signed up with them, and we started the climb. Listen, do not recommend. We started the climb like a Friday afternoon.
Afternoon?
Listen, it was after, I think it was like we met not afternoon, it was in the evening. So we were climbing in the night to get to a certain point where they had cabins.
Yeah, like halfway.
So we were at the bottom. I don't remember the name of that place, but I just know we were climbing through the night to get to the cabin place. I did not get to the cabin place I wasn't the last person. There were people behind me. But I did not get to the cabin place till around like 1 a.m. We slept, then we woke up, and then we had food, and then we went the other way. We continued to the journey. We got to the summit, and then we came back down, ate, slept, and then trekked back down Sunday. I just remember getting back to my apartment Sunday afternoon.
I remember when I went, I was not told that we were going to climb Blue Mountain. And I was a very unfit, overweight kid, and I was wearing the equivalent of Keds. And nobody told me that we're going to be climbing. So I had no good shoes. And I walked up that mountain in these Keds. And I remember my feet were just sore and burning. But you know what? Even though I was completely unfit and unprepared, when we got to the top, which was freezing.
Yes.
I don't know. I felt like I was on top of the world. It's really beautiful up there. So you know what? I'm going to go with Blue Mountain because it's so, even my husband was amazed. We have such a tall mountain. Please don't ask me like how tall it is, but it's very, very tall. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great trek to go up. Green and lush and beautiful.
I just remember Sunday coming down, like we were passing like people. I remember like there was a little shop there and, you know, we'd see people, some people going up, some people coming down, but we actually saw people who live near like the coffee plantations and they were just so friendly and so nice and just like cheering us on. And of course, if you wanted water, you could get water, juice, snacks, whatever. But yeah, it was an experience. Okay, we have two more. White Witch Golf Course in Mo Bay or YS Falls?
I mean, I think I would pick the falls over a golf course. I mean, the golf course is really nice. It's really green, but a golf course is a golf course. So I'm going to go with the falls.
Okay, and then we have Rose Hall Great House or Bob Marley Museum in Kingston.
Once again, I have not been to the Bob Marley Museum.
No.
You know when you live in a place and you just don't do the things that you're supposed to do there because you're always like, oh, I mean, I'll do that. Or like, you just think it's a tourist thing. Mm-hmm. So no, I have not gone to the Bob Marley Museum. But, you know, I always think that, you know, when tourists come, the best places for them are like the places where the beaches are and where the people are like outside with the stalls. And, you know, Kingston, I feel like Kingston is more of a place to go when you know somebody there. So you know places to go. Because otherwise just there's not really like a lot of tourist attractions that you would stumble across. If you know people there, like if, you know, let's say we organize a group trip, then Kingston is it. But I would send people to the Rose Hall Great House. I think it's a great history, an old plantation house. And one of the things I love about, you know, coming from the Caribbean and coming from Jamaica is that, you know, we've taken these places that were filled with such a painful history, and we have repurposed them for our own selves. So we've taken them back and we have created something beautiful out of them for our own culture. So Rose Hall is like a really great place. You can do a tour and it's a beautiful house and you get a lot of history about the plantation house and about the area. I would definitely recommend people go.
Yeah, I did it. I agree with you. I did the museum as a part of a group trip, but I took my entire family to Montego Bay. And I remember my mom was going for the first time. My dad was going for the first time. My husband, my kids, everywhere. And I'm like, we are going. They loved it. We had a great time. I love the history there. It's so beautiful, both at daytime and nighttime. It's just, I agree with you. I love how we've reclaimed these places and, you know, we're making them multi-purpose.
And you know, there's a witch there.
Yes, Annie. I listen, my grandmother told me these stories about Miss Annie. Listen, that's a whole other podcast.
Yes. I was actually scared of this witch growing up.
When I was little, I was scared.
Yeah.
But when I went with my family, you know, I wasn't. But my mom, she was like, did you see that? Did you see that?
Jamaican people take those things seriously. Yes.
Serious. Listen, she took it very serious. Okay, we're going to do some quick fire with food. So ackee and saltfish or curry goat?
Ackee and saltfish.
Fried breadfruit or bami?
Bami.
Jerk chicken or escovitch fish?
Oh, escovitch fish, but only if it's from Helsha Beach.
Yes. Oxtail or brown stew chicken?
Brown stew chicken, because oxtail is just, I mean, it's delicious, but it's just bone.
I agree. I never got with that. That's one meal. I was just, no.
Yeah, flavor,
not
but
me.
just bone. Come on.
Yeah, I'm a meaty girl. I love meat. Okay, so are we going to have a beef patty or fritters? Which, by the way, I've seen on menus the last couple of times. It's now called Stamp and Go, but I know it as fritters. So,
Saltfish fritters.
mm-hmm.
Saltfish fritters, I think it was called Stamp and Go, like from back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, and it might not even be, it might be on other Caribbean islands call it Stamp and Go, and we just call it saltfish fritters, but it's the same thing. Now, okay, the beef patty, if it's going to be a Tasty's beef patty.
Yes.
Or saltfish fritters, oh my Lord. Oh, I'm tempted to put the saltfish fritters in the patty so I could have both. I'm going to go with saltfish fritters.
Yes, I'm going with the fish fritters too. Are we drinking manish water or pepper pot soup?
I am not drinking manish water because I don't want goat's balls hitting in my face. So I'm going to go with a pepper pot.
Agreed. Okay, sweet treats. Sweet potato pudding or cornmeal pudding?
Sweet potato pudding.
Are we having a gizzada or coconut drops?
Gizzada.
Okay. Drinks. Are we drinking some white rum beverage or red stripe beer?
Lord, I don't think I can manage white rum, so I'm just going to go with the red stripe.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore. I went down that rabbit hole. Again, do not recommend. Sorrel or ting?
Well, I mean, if it's Christmas, you have to drink sorrel.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Malta or ginger beer?
Ginger beer. I never liked Malta.
My mom loves Malta. I don't understand it, but she loves it. Okay, and last one, tea or coconut water?
Coconut water.
Yes.
Fresh coconut water, like that the guy from the road like chops up with the machete and then gives you with the straw in it. Like,
yes.
Coconut, yes.
My husband laughs because 9 out of 10 times we fly into Kingston, and the second you step outside the airport, right across the road, right next to an ATM, is a man with a cart with coconuts. And I have to buy one. I'm like, yeah, we rent, it's right next to the rental car. I'm like, yeah, you go get the car. I'm getting me a coconut. Thank you, sir.
I also used to have like an eating schedule when I got there. It's not so bad now, but when I, like a few years ago when I would go, as soon as we landed, like I had a schedule, like at first I would need a patty and a Danish whirl from Tasty's, and then I would need a jerk chicken and festival for lunch, and then we'd have to go to Hellshaw for escovitch fish and festival, and then I would need a Sunday brunch with ackee and saltfish and bame and roast breadfruit and Johnny cakes, etc., etc. Like by the time I left, I was, I don't know, about 20 pounds.
20 pounds, yes. But it is so worth it, and I love a Sunday brunch. We love a Sunday brunch. Terra Nova for Sunday brunch, I recommend, because not a lot of people can handle the Strawberry Hills Drive.
Yeah, it's a bit far, but it's so beautiful. It's so worth it.
Beautiful. But yeah, that drive.
Yeah.
So if you can't make it, Terra Nova in Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get into your writing life real quick. I know Sweetness in the Skin is out. Are you working on any other books? Anything we can expect?
I am working on a second novel slowly, because I'm still so in this world of pumpkin and sweetness. It's a little bit hard to focus, but I am working on another novel, and all I can say now is that it explores the same themes of like family, and I'm very fascinated by this idea of generational trauma. So like a little bit where we talk about how Grandma Cecile is raised a certain way. And so, she treats Sophie a certain way, and then she treats Paulette a certain way. And then, then they carry that on. I'm also exploring that, something similar in the second book, because I'm fascinated by the ways that we are based on, how our parents raised us, which is how they are because of how their parents raised them, et cetera, goes all back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So yeah, there's lots of content, lots of things to unpack there. So at least we know you're working on something, so we have that to look forward to. But I'm curious about the books you're reading. So share with our listeners the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
The last two books, I read like about 3 books a week. I read a lot. Although I'm meeting all these bookstagrammers and they're reading a book a day. So I'm like, okay, I thought I was fast, but the last 2 books I read that really blew me away was Wayward by Emilia Hart. And I Have Some Questions for You by, I think it's Rebecca Mackay, might be the name.
Mm-hmm.
They were so good. Like they just completely blew me away. Wayward is a historical fiction, maybe a little bit of magical realism about 3 generations of women. And I Have Some Questions for You is about a murder that happens at a boarding school, but the main character is looking back on it from, like I think 25 years later, and she's gone back to the school and trying to piece things together. Oh, they were brilliant. I can highly recommend them both.
Yay, awesome. What books do you remember reading growing up that you loved?
I mean, I read so much, but my favorite book of all time was and still is Alice in Wonderland. I think it also really helped me like spark my interest in writing. I just love this idea of this girl just going on adventures and just meeting all these people. She was just open for everything and she was just accepting of everybody. She was just pretty cool, Alice. So it always remains my favorite book. And even today, I love reading like any iteration of Alice that I can get my hands on, some of which are quite dark. But my favorite one is called Alice by Christine Henry.
Ooh, love that. I'm writing that down. Alice by Christine Henry. Okay. So on the show, we also love indie booksellers. Do you have any indie bookstores near you? Are you working with anyone on your book launch?
Yeah, there's a few English indie booksellers here in Berlin where I am. My favorite one is called Love Story of Berlin, which is on Kastan in LA. They're really cute, really small shop, and it's really cozy. And I like their book selection, and they're just a nice group of people. And there's another one called Curious Fox, which is, I forget the area that it's in, but that's also like a really cool bookstore. I think 2 of those are my favorite. My other like favorite bookstore, which is not necessarily an indie bookstore, but it's like the English bookshop of Dussmann. They have a really, really great selection. And I'll actually be there signing some books as well. So
Yay, that is awesome. So getting back to your book now, getting back to Sweetness in the Skin. Again, I know you've done your job, you've written a book. I'm so excited for more readers to start reading it so I can talk about it more. But what are you hoping for in an ideal world that readers might think or feel, or just discussions they might have after they've turned the last page?
I mean, like I said at the beginning, I want them to feel at the end that they've actually visited Jamaica. I want them to feel like they were really in Jamaica. And I really want it to be a book that people who maybe don't typically read Caribbean literature pick up and actually get to explore a different world. I want them to have experienced our patois, our dialect, our local dialect, and just kind of been able to get an idea of the flavor of how we talk. I would love for people to, think about these ideas of colorism and classism and how colonialism have affected, these islands and still continues to affect not only these islands, but I think everywhere that experienced colonialism there's some remnants of these ideas of, the light skin, the dark skin, who's better off than whom. I think these are interesting discussion points. Again, this idea of family and generational trauma, why people do the things that they do. I think Paulette is a great figure to study when talking about this. Can we feel some sympathy for her in how she treats Pumpkin, even though she's quite an awful mother. And then finally, I think the role of men might be an interesting discussion point. You mentioned before about this, the strong woman. Jamaica, I think we are an island of strong women. And, there's mostly women in this book. And of course, Pumpkin lives in a house of women, but there's two men who are quite integral to her life. One is her father, who is basically not in the picture, and then kind of swoops in. And there's that very strange dynamic. And he is kind of the stereotypical, you have a stereotypical idea, Caribbean father or a Black father, just kind of not present, just kind of not interested. And I wanted to have Boots as a foil to that, because that is a stereotype. That does not mean that every Caribbean father, every Black father is like that. Boots takes on that parental figure with love and with joy, and he's really supportive, and he's there for Pumpkin, even though she is not his daughter. So I think it could also be interesting to talk about that sort of dynamic about, the Caribbean father or the Black father or the father figure.
100%. There's so many layers and themes that run throughout this book. But regardless, I think readers will enjoy this one. They'll walk away with a new perspective, I think, on just life in Jamaica and just seeing it through an authentic lens, because that's what I felt. This just felt so authentic, so real to me. It felt relatable. I'm like, yes, I know these people, I know these places. So it really sat well with me. But I appreciate you, Ishi, for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. It feels so good to talk to like a fellow yardie and just talk about things. And yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed the book.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.